I am another med school YouTuber, and on this channel I talk casually about my experiences in college and medical school and what it's been like. So today I want to talk about something that often gets thrown around in like advisory meetings or info sessions, that there's no checklist to get into medical school. I know I was told this not only in my college pre-med info session, but also by multiple advisors, that you should really just be yourself and do what interests you in college, which I think is true. You should be yourself and do what interests you. But people who say that there is no checklist to get into medical school are lying. I remember when I finally went to apply to medical school, I went to this meeting with a bunch of different advisors and a bunch of other pre-med kids in my class, and they handed us a sheet. And guess what was on that sheet? A checklist. You need to check all the boxes. So I just want to put this out there on the internet so that people know there literally is a checklist for getting into medical school. And if you're missing one of these buckets, you can do it. You can do something super creative with your time in extracurricular activities, and you'll probably live a very fulfilled life. But I'm just letting you know, it's there. There are things that help a lot. So I couldn't dig up the sheet that I had, but I'm gonna go basically off the top of my head of what was on this list. So first, obviously, is grades. And GPA is super important, we all know this. And they emphasize that you have your science GPA and then your non-science GPA. Both are relevant, but medical schools tend to look at both. I would say that what's kind of unfortunate about this process is that classes that you might be really interested in might be really hard and harder to get an A in, right? I really wish, just for my own personal growth, that I would have taken more math in college, but the reason that I avoided those hard quantitative classes was because I didn't want to get a bad grade. So I ended up taking a lot of classes where I knew I could do well, and were interesting and I learned, but it helped to bump up that GPA. Generally, schools will have posted their average GPA for accepted students listed somewhere on their website. That information is helpful. My college also had that record for themselves of students from our college who got this GPA, got into this med school or that med school, and I actually got that information, and that was really helpful. Okay, so checklist item number 2 is obviously the MCAT. Gotta take it. I think I'll make another video later about when in your college career it's appropriate to take the MCAT. I took it on my 2 gap years, and it was fine. It's just kind of, that gives you the space so that you're not studying during college while you're taking your classes. But MCAT, gotta take it, gotta have a score. I think that's kind of straightforward. So the number 3 is extracurricular activities, which is no shocker. Pre-meds, really need to be involved in something. I think you will hear common advice, which is true, to invest yourself into a smaller number of activities rather than do lots of little clubs that probably have, a meeting 1 hour a week and maybe a couple events. It's helpful to invest in something meaningful, because ultimately what they're looking for is leadership. And I see this as a medical student as well. Physicians and doctors really are oftentimes the leaders of a team. So it's helpful to see that people have leadership skills. So in regards to extracurriculars, sometimes you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone, because volunteering and research are the next 2 things I'm going to talk about. So number 4 is a sustained scholarly project. And that's a nice way of saying research. This is actually pretty challenging for me because I never worked in a lab or published a single thing while I was in college, even though a lot of my friends did. They throw in this nice thing called sustained scholarly project, which is, some kind of research. You don't even really need to publish something, but I think it is helpful to have the idea of you have engaged in one question and worked on it for a long period of time. More and more doctors are involved in research, even outside of any MD, PhD track. And lots of medical students will publish something during medical school. So this could be a senior thesis, or it could be working at a lab, which a lot of my friends did, or just some sort of other publication thing that's not a lab, qualitative research or something like that. I know when it comes to picking a lab, the things that my friends have had really important is having a supportive PI. It is highly unlikely that you will end up researching a topic that you are otherwise interested in. You can pick large buckets like brains or immunology or microbiology, but don't go to a lab because you're interested in the very specific thing that they're doing, I would say, because it gets so narrow so fast that you should really be thinking about who you want to be working with and what you want to be working with. If that is like live animals like mice, or with a petri dish, or with big data, those are the questions you should be asking yourself, rather than like, do I want to study this specific protein? Okay, number 5 is volunteering. Again, another thing. Yes, so it can be an extracurricular activity. I did a ton of volunteering while I was in college. It was definitely the most meaningful thing I did, was to get involved in public service. But it is just something else that medical schools sort of like want or expect to see, is some sort of volunteering. And if that's also your main extracurricular activity, great. But if you are like otherwise like involved in college clubs and working in a lab, volunteering was a thing that we were told to include in our application. So just another checkbox on the checklist. Okay, next is letters of recommendation, which is like part of the checklist because you're applying at this point. But you generally want a good letter of recommendation from one science professor, one non-science professor, and one sort of like work or extracurricular type person. It was very funny. Where I went to college, we had this one anatomy class that all the pre-meds took, and the amount of kissing up that every single pre-med did to get this one letter from this one anatomy professor was really fantastic. But it is what it is. I think that throughout your time in college, you're going to have at least 3 people who like you enough to write a letter. College is hard and you're allowed to mess up. It's like part of the learning process, but like try to have in mind like a couple people who like you enough to write you a letter. And last is shadowing. I think this is important for a lot of reasons. I think it is important to actually know if you want to go to medicine, and I'll talk more about that later. But there are lots of applications where they specifically ask if you have any clinical experience or shadowing experience. I think because of a lot of the red tape in healthcare of like filling out forms and stuff like that, it's actually really difficult for college students to get involved in healthcare and be in that environment at all. I know that when I was in college, I really did not spend a lot of time doing clinical medicine or hospital medicine or anything like that. But if you can shadow with a doctor, get in with a doctor, it is something that lots of medical schools will ask about, and that was something else that was listed on this checklist that we were given as well. I would say it is important, not even just to look on your resume, but just for your own experience, because it can be really different than what you think it is as a total layperson. And then final thing I want to talk about on this checklist is just the importance of applying early. I think that's probably the best advice I've been given. I didn't realize how important it really was until I went through the process. But all of these applications are like more or less on a rolling basis. So if the opening day to start and send in your applications is like June 1st, it needs to be on like June 1st or June 2nd or 3rd. If there's something in your life that's really holding you back and you are still a strong candidate, maybe delay getting your primaries in by a month. But I think that I've seen people without good pre-med advising think it's okay to send in their primaries in like September or October. And like it's okay. Obviously, like, there's nothing morally wrong or bad with that. But you really are setting yourself up for success if you can get in all of your applications as early as possible. So obviously I don't have this sheet anymore, but I just thought I would share what was on that checklist, because I think I had been told for 3 or 4 years, all throughout undergrad and even high school, that there's no magic checklist for medical school, just do what interests you, just be a strong student, and it's false. There's a checklist. I know the checklist is overwhelming. All of these things by themselves are very hard to achieve, and I honestly don't think you need all of them. I did not have all of them. I did not publish anything. I never worked in a lab. I really didn't have a big sustained scholarly project, and I am in fact a student at a medical school, so it does work out. But I just thought I would share those are the things that I was told to include or to have prepared for when I applied. So hopefully this will help you if you're a college student, just to wrap your mind around this is kind of what a plan could look like. You don't have to do anything like creative or out of the box or reinvent the wheel. There is a checklist, and there are lots of incredible medical students and doctors who have like done these things and been really successful and had like meaningful careers. So I hope this can help you just to have a little less anxiety about finding something really creative or finding the secret formula. There is a checklist. So hopefully this was helpful. Comment down below if you have any thoughts, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.